Why do newborns seek the breast, or ducklings follow their mother? From the very first moments of life, animals and humans show behaviors they were never taught. These actions aren't learned, they are wired into the brain as instincts, nature's own blueprints for behavior. Like the layout of a city shaped by a master plan, instincts map out the foundations of life's essential activities: finding food, staying safe, bonding with others. Over time, experience and learning build upon these foundations, adding layers of complexity that help each individual adapt to its unique surroundings. In this video, we'll explore how instincts and brain learning programs work together to shape survival, emotions, and social life. We'll start by illustrating how basic instincts influence both individual activities and social interactions. From tiny worms to humans, instincts play a crucial role in survival, adaptation, and social interactions across species. Instincts are everywhere. Let's dive in. When humans and other animals are born, they don't start with a blank slate. Their brains come preloaded with fundamental programs stored in neural networks. These programs process sensory input, control movement, store information, and regulate learning. Instincts are a specialized family of brain programs. They are orchestrated sequences of basic brain activities. Triggered by specific cues, instincts activate coordinated responses that help animals adapt to their environment and thrive. Even simple organisms rely on instincts to develop new behaviors in response to changing conditions, reinforcing their role as blueprints for growth. Broadly, instincts fall into two categories: those that guide interactions with the environment and those that regulate interactions within a species. Let's explore some common instincts and the basic programs that they orchestrate. Let's begin with a remarkable example of environmental instincts: the innate instinct of sea turtles' hatchlings to dig themselves out of their underground nest and rush to the ocean. This process unfolds in distinct stages, each governed by specific brain programs. In the first stage, triggered at birth, the hatchlings must dig their way out of the underground nest. The sensory program detects the surrounding sand, while the motor program controls the digging movements. Once out of the nest, a basic neural program detects key sensory cues such as differences in brightness between the sea and the land, and the sense of land and water. Based on that general information, a basic motor program that orients the turtle toward the sea is activated, and then, the crawling program is initiated. The crawling program controls the turtle's movement until it reaches the water, where additional programs take over, guiding swimming and early survival behaviors. This remarkable sequence of actions demonstrates how instincts coordinate fundamental sensory and motor brain programs to achieve critical survival goals. Isn't this get to the water instinct amazing? A tiny sea turtle enters the world on a barren stretch of sand, equipped with an innate sensory system that detects just a few key cues, instinctively paired with basic motor programs. The cues are simple yet specific and universal. They exist on all sandy beaches. This ancient instinct has guided millions of sea turtle hatchlings for millions of years, leading them to their life-sustaining habitat, the ocean. Beyond that, the mother's instincts guide her to find the perfect nesting spot, relying on just a few general sensory cues and motor programs to dig the nest and lay her eggs. Both the hatchling's journey and the mother's nesting behavior are driven by innate neural networks shaped by DNA instructions. However, the simplicity of these cues and instincts, which have sustained the species for millions of years, is now challenged by modern civilization. City lights confuse both emerging hatchlings and egg-laying mothers, reducing the number of hatchlings that reach the safety of the ocean and ultimately shrinking each new generation. Now, let's delve into social instincts, the innate behaviors that regulate interactions between members of the same species. Among these are caregiving instincts and their complementary counterpart, care-receiving instincts. Individuals possess both caregiving and care-receiving instincts, which are expressed in different situations. A fundamental example of these instincts is the bonding instinct between a mother and her offspring, such as the strong connection between a cow and her calf, a bond observed across many species. During a time window around birth, the mother cow quickly learns to recognize her calf and exhibits nurturing and protective behaviors, including nursing, licking, and vocalizing. In turn, the calf learns to identify its mother and depends on her for warmth, nourishment, and safety, reinforcing the instinctive drive for connection and survival. Another group of social instincts involves the bonding between parents. This pairing fosters connection both before and after sexual interaction, serving the purpose of raising offspring. These behaviors vary significantly across species. By comparing the neural networks of two closely related species with vastly different bonding behaviors, we can better understand how specific brain mechanisms regulate social attachment. For example, prairie voles are monogamous and form strong pair bonds, whereas meadow voles are solitary and promiscuous. Studies have found that these behavioral differences are linked to innate differences in the density of the receptors of the hormones oxytocin and vasopressin in certain brain areas associated with reward in pairing. These findings support broader research showing a connection between those hormones and positive social behaviors across various species, including humans. Two powerful instincts, care receiving and caregiving, are built into the brain's neural networks. They are central to how all social animals develop, including humans. Every animal has both instincts, but care receiving comes first and caregiving develops later. These two instincts act like umbrella systems. They consist of other instincts and basic brain programs. One such instinct is the mimicking instinct. By mimicking their caregivers, young animals learn how to navigate their environment both on their own and as part of a group. Ducklings follow their mother. Prey animals learn to move in coordinated packs. Caregiving and care receiving consist of physical and emotional brain programs, which may be expanded by brain learning mechanisms. These instincts drive goal-oriented interactions that share a common objective, though it may appear different to each participant. For example, when a bird feeds a worm to its chick, the mother and chick are instinctively coordinated to achieve the shared goal of transferring the worm into the chick's beak. These interactions, embedded in neural networks, are closely tied to innate emotions. The mother experiences satisfaction when delivering the worm, and the chick feels the pleasure of being fed. They also serve an important learning function. Through caregiving, especially feeding, offspring learn to recognize the adult facial features of their species, a skill essential for future social recognition. This illustrates how brain-based associative learning programs, working in tandem with innate instincts, enable the acquisition of one of the most critical social skills, recognizing members of one's own species. This principle is widely used in conservation. For example, a rescued eagle chick is fed with an eagle puppet to help it recognize its own kind before being released into the wild. This is just one of many examples that illustrates an important principle of how behaviors develop. A skill learned during the execution of one instinct can later be applied to other, seemingly unrelated behaviors. For example, the ability to recognize members of one's own species learned while feeding is later used in socializing and mating. So far, we've looked at how sensory and motor brain programs shape animal behavior. But what about emotions? Do animals have emotions, and if so, how do we know? Could emotions be more than just human, something deeper, something instinctive? To find out, we must examine the patterns of behavior and the neural systems behind them. We cannot truly know what a sea turtle hatchling feels as it rushes to the waves, what a mother cow experiences as she nuzzles her calf, or why prairie voles bond for life while meadow voles remain promiscuous. But these behaviors stem from innate neural networks, deeply embedded circuits that regulate actions much like our own. While we can't access their inner worlds, we can observe behaviors that mirror human emotions. The hatchling's urgency suggests a drive for safety, an instinctive pull toward the ocean. The mother cow's gentle care reflects maternal attachment, while the calf's clinging evokes feelings of trust and security, much like a human infant's bond with a parent. Prairie voles exhibit affection and loyalty, contrasting with the meadow vole's impulsivity and promiscuity. These behaviors are not random but encoded in neural networks shaped by evolution. Similarly, human emotions like love, fear, and desire are expressed through activated neural circuits. Both humans and animals are born with innate instincts embedded in their neural networks. These networks, activated by innate cues, regulate physical and emotional responses, which in turn trigger other instincts, expanding into new behavior patterns. Let's now explore key instincts that shape emotional development and influence behavior. Caregiving and care receiving are two interrelated umbrella instincts that give rise to a wide range of sub-instincts and behaviors. Many of these sub-instincts are triggered by compound cues, signals made up of two components, one that activates a type of behavior, such as feeding, reproduction, or exploration, and another that evokes the emotional tone of that behavior, such as desire, comfort, or vulnerability. Emotions are not just byproducts of instinct, they're an integral part of how instincts work. They influence the likelihood that a behavior will actually be carried out. Take, for example, a mouse hiding in its hole. Its feeding instinct makes it desire the piece of cheese outside. But its safety instinct makes it aware of the nearby cat. The decision it makes depends on the relative strength of these competing emotions, desire versus fear. Humans and animals are born with compound cues that activate their innate instincts. Through experience, they learn new compound cues that build upon and expand those original instinctive patterns. These instincts are closely tied to a range of emotions. Let's take a look at some of them. Humans and animals are born with compound cues that activate their innate instincts. As they interact with the world, they learn new compound cues that build upon and expand these original instinctive patterns. One of the most common mechanisms behind this learning is associative learning, the process of linking one stimulus with another. A well-known example of this is Pavlov's classical conditioning. Let's briefly review how it works. Before conditioning, as the dog hears the sound of a bell, it does not react by salivation, just by a neutral response to a neutral sound. The bell has no special meaning to the dog. It's not connected to any instinct. Also, before conditioning, as the dog is shown a piece of meat, it salivates. The smell of the meat is an innate cue hardwired into the brain to activate the feeding instinct. The dog salivates automatically. This is a built-in behavior, triggered by a natural stimulus. Then comes the pairing. The bell rings as the meat is presented. This happens again and again. Gradually, the dog's brain connects the ring of the bell with the meat. After that, when the bell rings, even if the meat doesn't appear, the dog salivates. The bell has become a learned cue. One that now triggers the feeding instinct on its own. The instinct has expanded, and so has the behavior. This process, called associative conditioning, was discovered by Pavlov and became central to behaviorism. The general principle behind Pavlov's conditioning is this: initially, there are neutral stimuli that do not trigger a certain innate instinct. There are stimuli that trigger that instinct. These are called innate cues. When a neutral stimulus is repeatedly paired with an innate cue, it becomes a learned cue that can also activate the instinct. However, the exact response triggered by a learned cue can vary across species and individuals. An instinct orchestrates the activities of multiple brain functions, and any given cue may be directly connected to only some of them. Which functions are affected by an expanded cue depends on the connections among sensory centers, motor control centers, executive regions, and memory systems. These neural architectures vary across species and individuals, contributing to the wide variation in how learned cues influence behavior. Different behaviors can evoke similar emotions, such as comfort, which may arise from eating, a hug, or intimate touch. Though the behaviors vary, the underlying emotional experience involves overlapping brain systems like the hypothalamus, amygdala, and insula, mediated by neurotransmitters like oxytocin and dopamine. Yet, the physical sources differ. Comfort from eating engages the digestive system, a hug involves touch, and intimacy involves the sexual system. Despite these differences, shared neural mechanisms create continuity in emotional experiences across different contexts and throughout life. It turns out that a few common instincts underlie all these developments. Let's take a closer look. Care receiving and caregiving are two powerful umbrella instincts embedded in the brain's neural networks of all social animals, including humans. They are central to the development of social behavior. While every animal possesses both instincts, care receiving emerges first, and caregiving develops later. These instincts are expanded into complex behaviors through various learning mechanisms. One of the most common is mimicking. For example, ducklings and young prey animals learn to follow their mothers by mimicking their movements. Children, too, mimic adult behavior, even it is not a life-sustaining one, and they don't need it for survival. That leads them to exhibit caregiving behaviors early on. In humans, caregiving and care-receiving instincts shape a wide range of individual behaviors and social dynamics. At their core, these processes involve learning cues in one context that are later applied across diverse behaviors. Unlike other animals, humans employ language to introduce complex man-made cues that drive behaviors rooted in innate instincts. For instance, traffic signs serve as such man-made cues that regulate movement, leveraging neural programs originally designed for instinctive actions. Man-made cues can also evoke powerful emotions. For example, money. Both as a tangible object and as an abstract concept, money triggers strong emotional responses that drive a broad range of individual and collective behaviors. Even more remarkably, people can generate behavioral and emotional cues using language alone. Words and phrases, spoken, written, or even implied, can evoke strong emotional responses or prompt specific actions. First as care receivers and later as caregivers, children learn to interpret the emotions and attitudes of others through both physical cues, such as facial expressions and body language, and verbal cues, including tone of voice and language. Later, learned cues drive many behaviors that are different from the ones in which they were learned. Interactions between caregivers and care receivers often involve guidance, fostering learning and skill development. For example, when a parent helps a child get dressed, the child learns to coordinate actions, follow sequences, and eventually perform the task independently. These interactions also convey contextual knowledge, teaching children when and why specific actions are necessary. A set of positive and negative emotions that emerge during care-receiving and caregiving interactions is closely tied to the dynamics of control and the surrender of control. Young children initially surrender control willingly, relying on caregivers for safety and guidance. Over time, however, they develop a desire for autonomy and become more selective about when and to whom they relinquish control. As they mature, they also begin to seek opportunities to exert control over others. These evolving interactions give rise to a wide range of emotions. Control-related emotions arise in anyone participating in a group interaction. A participant may follow instructions of some participants and give instructions to others. Those roles may be fixed, or they may shift throughout the exchange. Here are some of the positive and negative control-related emotions that are evoked in caregiving and care-receiving interactions. Control cues learned while receiving care may evoke positive feelings like comfort, safety, and trust, and negative feelings of vulnerability, inferiority, and anxiety. Conversely, giving care can stir a mix of compassion and responsibility, along with possible feelings of superiority or even arrogance. During childhood, children learn how to identify those cues and how to handle their control emotion. Later in life, they implement that knowledge in all their social interactions. The specific emotions triggered by these cues depend on the context in which they are encountered. The overall feeling experienced in interactions involving a control component depends on the individuals involved and the specific context. Maintaining a positive balance among all emotions is crucial for successful, harmonious interactions. As children grow, we observe visible changes in their bodies. At the same time, their brains are also developing to regulate those bodily changes. This tandem development becomes evident through changes in behavior. New behavioral traits, composed of cues and their corresponding physical and emotional responses, are recorded in the brain structures that are mature at the time. Some older cues become associated with new responses, but they do not lose their earlier associations. Instead, both old and new connections remain embedded in the brain's neural networks. Earlier in life, sensory and motor cortical areas, along with subcortical structures such as the thalamus, amygdala, and hypothalamus, play a primary role in both the learning and execution of innate and early learned behaviors. As development progresses, frontal cortical regions, including the prefrontal cortex, anterior cingulate cortex, and orbitofrontal cortex, which mature later, begin to contribute more actively to the learning, regulation, and refinement of newer and more complex behaviors. For example, a familiar soft blanket that in infancy was associated with comfort, security, and warmth may later become linked primarily with warmth, while the feeling of security becomes a sentimental, more distant association. Yet, even in adulthood, lying in bed under a blanket can evoke that same deep sense of comfort and safety. The original sensation reactivates the original emotional response, now within a new context. As the brain continues to develop, more behavioral traits are recorded, each encoded in the brain structures that are mature at that stage. Importantly, even if early life situations, such as being held or swaddled as a baby, no longer occur, the cues learned during those moments can still evoke similar emotional responses later in life, across different situations and behaviors. The brain does not discard these early associations, instead, it builds upon them. As a result, a familiar touch, texture, or tone of voice may continue to trigger feelings of comfort, safety, or trust well into adulthood. Cuddling, for instance, may not only recreate those sensations but also assign emotional meaning to the interaction. The one being hugged may feel that the hugger is the source of safety and comfort, while the hugger may experience a sense of responsibility and protection, echoing the role of a caregiver. Instincts are built into the brain's neural networks and help coordinate the activity of other brain systems, which are also made up of neural networks. Animals are born with a set of instincts that allow them to manage the body's basic needs for survival and reproduction. These instincts bring together information from the senses, movement, and memory to guide behavior. The brain also includes mechanisms that help instincts grow and become more flexible, so they can guide both individual and social behavior. In this presentation, we looked at a few examples to show how basic instincts shape more complex behaviors. We focused on the two umbrella instincts and their compound cues, the caregiving and care-receiving instincts, and the central role that they play in the development of behavior during childhood. We saw that different behaviors and emotions can come from the same underlying instinct, showing how instincts act as blueprints for behavior. However, behavior is not shaped by instincts alone. Other important factors include a person's body and brain chemistry, how they think and learn, and the environment they grow up in. These factors work with instincts to shape, change, or even block certain behaviors. Together, they help form a person's personality and character. This playlist about nature and nurture explores how inborn instincts and life experiences work together to shape who we become. The videos dive into the science of human and animal behavior, showing how nature provides the blueprint and nurture builds upon it. Click to watch the next video in this playlist, The Development of the Sex Instinct During Childhood. It explores how early life shapes adult behaviors, yours and of people around you.